Atta girl. Yep. Get Megan in the picture. Yep. Wonderful. Yay.
One more. Oh, we're
Thank
cute.
you.
That's so good.
Selfies.
Right.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
We will share them from all over. So it turns out, and it isn't always the case, that when we have an opportunity to pair up authors, sometimes their books are really different from each other. And so our conversations are interesting because we have to really stretch or bridge the gaps. But for some reason, and I can say that we thought of this before I'd actually read both of their books,
funny.
the similarities in these books are astonishing.
They are.
That's what you both said to me,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Also, these are two good authors who've actually read each other's books. Most of the time, it's all on me because they haven't done that, and that makes it even more fun. I know. So we are going to talk about campus crime, dark academic, and whatever it is, but I would like to say, although both of them have framed books in southern colleges, small southern colleges, I think the town and gown drama, especially in Megan's book, is very reminiscent of Cambridge or Oxford, where there has been for centuries a real clash between the students and the faculty at those elite British colleges and the people who live in the town. And there was a wonderful series that a British author wrote about Cambridge and Oxford during the plague, like 1348 or whatever. And what they did was, because their students were all dying, they would go and poach from each other. So they would send an elite team from Cambridge over to Oxford to steal a group of students and get them back to Cambridge so they didn't lose their college and their income. So, I mean, it was, this is based on real history. So the town gown thing and the the college rivalry thing was a real thing and dangerous.
Yeah.
Right.
That is strange.
I know. I love it. JT also writes a series not under her own name, but under the name Josh Walker, which I truly love. And it's about a CIA librarian. You gotta love that there, right? And when it starts in the Vanderbilt University Library because JT lives in Nashville. So at some point after we've talked to Megan, I'd like you to do a little conversation about Josh Walker. And it's been a really neat thing because JT has published those books independently because, they didn't fit into her normal profile. And so they've been particular fun, and she's been very kind to sign them and send them to us so we can sell them. So I love that. All right. Who wants to start? You want to quiz Megan?
I think we should start with the number 5 New York Times bestselling author in the house. Yeah?
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I will say, because I am a big fan of J.T. Ellison as well. And when I started reading her book, it was so, we're both obviously from a southern state, but the similarities to me were so fun. There's the little details too. We both have, our main character is the daughter of a professor. So they're both set in these small towns where these characters grew up. And then also mine's a college, where you can actually, the person kind of belongs first to the small town and then sort of becomes part of the university or the school there as well. And I think both of them have this push and pull between the town itself and do you belong to the town or do you belong to the school? Was yours, what do you think about when you're setting up this dynamic? And I love small towns and I'm sure you do too. What draws you to those?
I love the big towns too,
Yeah.
but most of my stuff takes place in Nashville, but the small town, it's so insular. There's always secrets. Mm-hmm. There's always a family that, has controlled everything. It's just so easy for everyone to identify with because everybody has seen that or been experiencing that as they grow up. Mm-hmm. But so last scene actually takes place, the first half of it takes place in Marchburg. And if you've read Good Girls Lie, you might recognize Marchburg as the setting of that entire book. Mm-hmm. It is not a character in this book the way it was in Good Girls Lie, but it is the backdrop for my main character going home you know, you can never go home again. And
Right.
boy, isn't that true?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you've got, yours is at a college. So mine's at a girls' boarding school, a prep school. Yours is a college.
Right.
But they have all the same traditions and they have all the same, especially the Southern kind of weird things that go on.
Yeah.
Yours has the howling.
It does have
Tell
the
us
howling.
about the howling
Okay.
because that freaked me out.
Okay. Oh, yay. I'm glad. And I'm sorry. So the quick backstory to this book, it was inspired by like a really long college visit road trip I took with my junior in high school. So I have a 19 and a 17-year-old, and we did a road trip all across North Carolina, but then all the way to upstate New York, which was sort of like a way for me to also be like, when am I going to get to have this experience with my almost grown child again? And there is such a thing as too many visits in a short period of time because like they kind of blend together after a while, right? And so what I was realizing was I felt like I was hearing these same sort of traditions over and over again. And then I became convinced that this was like the story they were telling us on the surface to lure us to get to send our children to them. And there was something else they weren't saying. Oh, yeah. And in the middle of one of the tours, I leaned over to my daughter and I was like, I wonder what they don't want us to know. And that's where this idea was born from. And it did start with the setting itself. When Beckett returns home to this town of Wyatt Valley, she says Wyatt Valley has two states of being, the stillness and the howling. And it's sort of when the winds come in the fall and you hear them like a cry in the night. And so I thought, okay, if there's a secret tradition, what will it be based on? And I decided, well, that's what it's going to be based on because you can't plan for it. You don't know when it's coming, and there's not that many rules, and it's basically like everyone at the college spills out into the woods. They're chased by seniors in masks, and they're all trying to make it to the far edge of campus. But they're not the only ones with a tradition, because then the town itself also has a tradition that they don't know about. So that's kind of the premise of the book, and like Beckett had left 20 years earlier when one of these traditions went terribly wrong and two men ended up dead and her roommate disappeared and was never seen again. She vows never to return, dun, 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 until her daughter Delilah secretly applies to the same college and earns a full scholarship, and they're drawn back to this place. And I love that we have that same sort of theme of being drawn back to a place. And your character almost is drawn back because things have also gone awry in her life in DC area, correct? But it also has to do with these family secrets and the secrets of the past. So I'd love if you could talk more about that.
Sure. So my main character, Hallie James, is literally having the worst day of her life. She thinks she's being promoted. She's a forensic scientist, runs a lab, thinks she's being promoted to run the entire show, and instead gets fired. Goes home a little bit freaked out because she's separating from her husband and is supposed to sign the paperwork that day and has moved into a friend's basement in the meantime while she's getting her divorce. And now she can't do that. She doesn't have the funding to be able to live out on her own. So she's going to have to move back home into her marriage. And then her father calls and he has fallen and broken his leg, needs surgery. And she's like, I am out of here. This is a great opportunity to go home, reset, help my dad. She's really close with her father. He was a single father who raised her, and gets home only to find out that everything she knew about her life is a complete lie. He's been lying to her the entire time from the moment she was 6 years old. He's told her her mother died in a car accident, and she hasn't. She was murdered, and she comes across the paperwork that shows this. And also who the murderer is. And I'm not going to spoil that because that's really fun. And it's just, I mean, can you imagine finding out that nothing that you believe about yourself is real? And it's really an examination of how memory can be manipulated and how easily it can be manipulated. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of fun. And
Only you would say that. A lot of fun. This woman is in a living tragedy. And JT is going, yeah, that's what it means to be the God of your book, right? Because if you are, you do know how it's going to work out, right?
Right. And that's, I mean, our job, I don't think you would disagree with this at all. Our job is to look at a character and say, all right, they're having a bad day. How can I make it worse? how can I hurt them more? How can I mess up their lives more? How can I make things even more difficult? And then when you think you've made it as bad as you can, you do something else and make it worse. And that's how they create. I mean, it's different. Doing a standalone is very different than a series. And in a standalone, this is what you have to do. You have to continue to turn the screw. In a series, obviously the plot is what's making things bad for the character. But in a standalone, you just have to
But
make
in
it
a
miserable.
series, somebody has to survive. You know,
Sure,
like
and
the
you know
lead
they're going to
character.
survive.
Yeah, and so there's sort of a safety factor for the reader.
Right.
You're
Yeah.
pretty sure that Spencer's going to make it to a new case in Boston.
Right.
But and also the punishment that you deal out to these people is so terrible. They're going to spend the rest of their life recovering.
Right, they're
you know,
totally
and so you
traumatized.
can't turn around and put them back into
No.
it, or they'll
Yeah.
just go completely off the edge forever.
You know, people have been asking for a sequel to this story, and I'm like, I don't even know how. That would be impossible to do. Have you ever written a sequel to one of your standalones?
Only from one of my YAs, and it was from a different character's point
Okay.
of view. But
Okay.
the same thing, I always say, like, we just got through something. And if you, like, we're going to have to ruin their life again, like, because they're not in an investigative role.
No, not
so
at all.
to make them the center of a mystery where, like you were saying, I feel like in a thriller, you're pushing someone to an extreme and you're literally spiraling a character out of control. Like, their life is out of control. And then they have to come face to face with not only like the mystery, but also themselves. And so by the end of this arc, you feel like you've made it through. We've learned so much about this person, and I just hope they're okay, honestly.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I want to
like,
give
I'm
them a little
so
break.
sorry.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you actually maim them, and so that makes it extremely difficult to imagine them as the center of a new book. I want to go back to my town and gown thing. One of the things in Megan's book that I was very struck by is that this college is up on a mountain or a hill. It's up there above the town, and there is a real economic and social gulf between the elite at the college, the faculty and the students, and the people living down under, the townspeople. And that's why I said it was a town and
Yeah.
gown thing, which is the British phrase for it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very important part of your book.
Yeah, and I think it's something I'm drawn to in different ways in a lot of my books. I think in The Last House Guest, that setup is very similar of this town where there's the vacation people who come every summer, and then there's the people whose livelihoods kind of exist around that, and what happens with these relationships that cross the divide, and how this history sort of impacts the way you view one another. And then if you were a person in one world, what happens when you take a step into the other world? And it seems, I think, that Beckett feels like she belongs in both, but I think when you do that, sometimes you feel like you belong in neither anymore, right?
Especially because their parents are still there.
Right.
I mean, they, professors at the college.
Right.
So talk about that tie-in. They're townies, but they also belong to the school.
Right. And same with your character,
Yeah.
right? She
Yeah.
she grew up there and then
She
went
grew
to the
up
boarding
in
school.
good school.
Yeah.
Yeah. She grew up being homeschooled, and then I guess as a ninth grader joined good.
Yeah.
And graduated, but it wasn't the same. I mean, she just wasn't. She wasn't a part of the tradition. She wasn't a part of. She didn't live in the dorm. She lived at home. It's just very different kind of
Right.
setup.
Right. And I do think, like, for Beckett, when she goes to this college, she feels like, oh, I'm an insider, right? I know everything about this place. Like, I'm going to tell you all the traditions. And then she meets her roommate, who is like this larger than life type character who doesn't need to be there. She doesn't need to be there. She's a legacy herself. And Beckett, I think, finds herself kind of swept up into this whole other world that then spirals out of her own control.
Well, and she's even one of the guys that she has a relationship with is
Right.
very antagonistic towards her
Right.
because
You left. Yeah.
you knew everything, you knew all the tunnels, you knew all the things, because she showed off about it a little
Right.
bit, and it got her
Right.
in big trouble.
Sure did. But I think that's something like that's the theme of going home, right? Is like everyone knows you a certain way. And same with yours. Like when she goes home, she immediately is seeing somebody who knew her from however many years ago and having to navigate those relationships and being in your childhood home. And like you said, memories, I feel like How do you approach that when you're writing about like how your memories change as you kind of like see things from different perspectives, or is that something you set out to do from the start?
I mean, that's an exploration for me. I have a terrible memory.
Okay.
And there are things that I'm absolutely positive, I remember happening, and my family would be like, "That didn't happen," and and vice versa. They're like, "Do you remember?" And I was like, "That didn't happen." Yes. So we have that disconnect just in my personal world, and so it's super easy to put that into somebody else and just make them. I mean, it doesn't make them an unreliable narrator, but it does of their own life,
Right.
Right. And she, poor Hallie, I mean, she really, everything that she knows down to the car accident, not true. So she has to rebuild every bit of memory. And I do a lot of rebuilding of memory, talking to friends, talking to people. They're like, you don't remember that night that we went and did it? And I'm like, I don't even know who that person is. Like, so it is, do we remember the things we want and forget the things we don't?
Right. Or are we missing like a little piece of information that changes the story that our memory creates from something?
And that's what makes us writers, right? We're plugging in from all the different perspectives into the story instead of just having that one point of view.
Right.
We get to bring in all the others. And that's what makes the book come alive and be really, really rich canvases to work with.
Which is why I think thrillers are such an excellent character study, honestly, because you're just examining all the different layers of characters and you put them in these extreme situations and you just reveal who they are almost by what choices they make.
Speaking of choices, I mean, one of the things that I do just to really get to know is to find out what their biggest shame is.
I do what their biggest fear is.
Okay.
I love that.
Okay. So I mean, they go hand in hand, right? What are you ashamed of? What are you afraid of? You get those combinations in a character and they become real.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you. Mine are my buddies.
Oh, totally. They grow. And I think once you know what a character, and they're very similar, I think, because when I think about a fear, it's not just like an external fear, but what you don't want somebody to know or how you don't want to be perceived. And I feel like once I understand that about a character, I understand how they react in a situation and why they react within relationships in a certain way. And they come to life and they just become these different 3D people, like magic a little bit.
Like magic.
Right?
Yeah. Do they lie to you at all?
Well, I think they keep things from me. I don't think they're trying to lie to me, but I just haven't gotten below. Like, I feel like it's something I think a lot about when I'm writing is, why is a narrator choosing to tell a story a certain way? And so they just haven't felt the need to tell me these really important things about them. And me writing that first draft is sort of exploring them. What about you? Do you know them? Like, do you know the things when you start?
I think I know them, and they sometimes lie to me. They lie. They genuinely lie. And then I'll be going through and I cannot make the book work. And I'll finally be like, all right, we got to talk. What is happening here? And then somebody else comes in and says, oh, well, she didn't tell you about X.
Right.
And suddenly I realize that my character's been lying to me the whole book. And then the book appears in front of me.
Right. It's peeling back the secrets. You
Yes.
just hadn't exposed it yet.
But, it sounds like you're a little more refined.
No.
I'm kind of,
Oh, no.
I'm out there going,
Not at all. Not at all. I fly by. I never know anything. Like, I fly by the seat of my pants. And then,
Do you
like,
outline?
No.
Yeah.
No. Do you?
No.
Yeah.
And that can get you in big
It
trouble.
can. I sort of have this hybrid method now with like I feel like once I know the structure, that helps me map things out. And then I sort of like, if I can see the quarter mark, I can write to there. And if I see like a halfway turning point, I can write to there. And then this Excel spreadsheet grows as I'm going with like, here's the dangling questions. And those become what I have to answer later on. Because I have gotten where like a book takes 4 rewrites to be like, ooh, that's actually the story I was writing.
Yeah. Oh, no, that happens all the time. I do what I call 40 scenes.
Ooh.
So it's a little, I am a gardener, not an architect, right?
Okay.
I'm not a pantser, but I'm a gardener. I know what my seeds are. I till my soil. I go out and take care of everything. I fertilize, and then I throw my seeds, and we see what comes up.
I love
And
that
whatever comes up is what I work with. Yeah. The architect obviously is somebody who's going to plan everything out and know exactly. Well, I didn't garden the book that I'm working on.
Oh no.
I didn't garden at all. I just started writing without even looking at where the garden was going to go. And I got into really big trouble. And I had done my 40 scenes, but I only had 30 when I started writing. And so 40 scenes, I have learned, is a good cheat for writer math. Anything.
I'm taking notes right now.
Anything it can be, right? It can be a line of dialogue. It can be a setting. It can be a turning.
Yeah.
You know, I always have at least 4 turnings per book. That way I don't get stuck in the middle. Any of those things. Once I have 40 of those, then if you multiply that by 2,000, you have 80,000 words of your book just kind of ready to go. If I start without the 40 scenes,
Okay.
the wheels come off the bus.
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I need the 40 scenes. So that's my version of outlining.
Yeah. So it's almost like you're doing like a expanded outline-ish, like just vague, like
And they're
turning
not in
points.
any order.
Oh, so they're okay.
Oh,
just
no.
these are the things that
Just
will happen.
anything,
I like
and
that a
everything.
lot.
It's very freeing. It's very open. And then, you know, if I start going, wait a second, I've gone off the rails. I need to go back and put them in order. And then I know this happens and this happens and this happens. Yeah, it's gardening.
I'm going to
You
ask her
never
a
know
lot
what's gonna
more
come
about
up.
this later. Like, this is amazing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Sometimes people write front to back.
Yeah.
Some people actually start at the end and write this way. And I have had authors who like start in the middle. They start with a kernel and then they go this way. So it's kind of a certain. Diana and I talked about this a lot last night at our Outlander event. She does sort of what you do, which is, you know, scenes all over. And then every one of her books actually has a geometric shape where she sticks everything, and she can't do it until she kind of sees it. And this new book that she's working on is this one, which she's not done before. And so, you know, everybody's creative mind works differently. And where you're successful is when you figure out
Yeah.
what that is for
What
you,
your process
which
is.
isn't going to work maybe for any other human.
Yeah.
True story.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I used to write linear, absolute start to finish. And then I saw Diana speak. And I heard her talk about her process, how she writes what she's ready to write and what's working for her that time and what she's thinking about and what she's excited about. And I went, well, that's a really cool way to do it. You can do it that way. That's allowed. And I started doing that because I think Diana is probably one of the most brilliant writers on the planet. And I started moving around in the story, and the story just, they get so much richer when you're not just trying to force yourself to march through the whole plot. Yeah, it's very
But
cool.
there's a lot of time required to assemble it. It's the connective tissue that takes her forever. We had a conversation last night about, you know, we're not taking any orders until this time it's a real book. Because last time for years she would say to people, I'm almost done. And then we get a whole lot of orders. And we had to make up all the stuff about the book, which is how we wound up with 30,000 reserved because, you know, none of us could. It didn't really exist. And when we made it real, we were horrified. Absolutely horrified. We didn't think there's any way. And in truth, there wasn't really any good way to do it. It was a disaster in many respects. But that was the problem, was that she...
Yeah, the transitions. How do you
Yeah,
weave them
exactly.
into an actual story that people will finish a chapter and be like, oh my gosh, I need to turn the page and find out what happens next. It's hard.
Yeah, but the transition has to work for the reader, too. I mean, it works for you when you're putting the book together, but if it only works for you when it goes out in the world and the reader goes, wait, that's not going to be successful.
No. Do you do linear or do you hop around?
I generally write in the order the book is read, which is not always linear. Like, I wrote my book that moves in reverse in the order that it's read, and I'm sure there was a better way to do that because that was like a lot of editing and trial and error when I'd be like, oh, that's what happened 2 days after, and go back and do. But I think I do like to do that for the character. Like, I write first person, so I'm thinking about it that the character is telling a story a certain way. And so I generally write that way until I get stuck. And then I give myself permission to do anything I see. And a lot of times I won't necessarily know the plot, but I'll know where I want the character arc to end up. Like sometimes I actually know the last line of a book. I don't know who did it, but I'm like, that's the last line of the book, and that's something I can work towards. But I use Scrivener now, which I think is super helpful because I don't feel like I have to write linearly. And so I really just think about it that I'm writing scenes like I'm writing a scene in this area, and I do give myself permission, like, let's switch it around. If I see a scene later on, I'm going to go ahead and write it. But yeah, for the most part.
Yeah, I use Scrivener, and that's the best thing in the world because you
it's
can
wonderful.
just move things around. Be like, wait a second, I did that this afternoon. I was moving chapters around. So I'm like, this didn't work.
You might tell them what Scrivener is.
Oh, Scrivener is a really great writing software that a lot of us use. Instead of Word you have to write, pretty linearly, and it's very difficult to move things around. Scrivener, it's by a company called Literature and Latte. You can download it. It's $40, and it is one of the most powerful writing softwares you will ever see. And a lot of us use it because of that.
Yeah, and I think I only use the simplest functions of it, honestly.
Yeah, it's a eat the fish and leave the bones kind of program because it can do a lot. It can publish. It's actually an entire self-publishing platform inside of it and everything, and formatting and all kinds of stuff.
But just to be able to see, even in like the side, here is, a list of the scenes that you have. Because for me, a lot of it is going back and forth within the Word document. Like, where was that? What did I say there? And here you just click over and you look. It's a beautiful thing. And
how do you organize yours? Do you I mean, I'm like emojis and colors and the whole nine yards.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
I'm just straight like structure on the left and out by scene, and that's it.
Oh, man.
But
Wow, you guys are really geeking out here.
I know.
Any aspiring writers in the crowd? There you are. Let's go back to the actual book.
Sorry.
And I thought in both cases, you have deep family secrets, but you have an unusual situation for your single mother.
Yes.
So why don't you describe that to us? Because that's not necessarily a standard.
Yeah. So when Beckett fled home, her senior year of college, she went to a sister school in London, and she met a guy there. And she became pregnant with her daughter, Delilah. And even though they had a strong relationship, it was, very short, and they were both very young, and he just didn't seem like he was ready. And she was very independent and didn't really give him a second chance and was like, I'm doing it on my own. And I like to think that anyone's strength is also a weakness. And she's super independent, where she doesn't want her parents' help. She doesn't want the father. She doesn't want Delilah's father's help at all. Even though he is a good father and they have a good relationship, she's like, no, thank you. And it gets to the point where she feels like she has to ask the 4 words she swore she'd never ask of him at a pivotal point in the book, which is, I need your help, because he's also the only other person who would care as much about her daughter. And I think for Beckett, like, she had rebuilt her entire world around her daughter. She's a ghostwriter, and she feels like she can slip into anyone else's voice. But I think she's almost become afraid of her own voice and her own stories. So she is very independent in a way that she's used to keeping her own secrets and making her own decisions, and doesn't like to allow other people's points of view sometimes. But suddenly you find yourself, I've always joked, like, I would never be involved in a thriller because, like, I would just not go into the basement if I heard noise, right? Like, I would call 911 the second something went terribly wrong. But this was the first time I was writing a book where I was like, I mean, maybe I would, because would I, if I got a dropped call from my daughter in the middle of the night and couldn't reach them and heard something, would I drive 4 hours in the middle of the night through the mountains to lay eyes on them just to make sure they were okay? I mean, I think I might, right? And then I'm like, oh, I would be part of this thriller. So I feel like she is human, because even though she's making these impulsive decisions, I understood at the core why she was making them, like what matters to her
Okay,
deeply.
but let's talk about the guy here for a minute.
Oh,
because
Trevor.
in so many situations like this, the guy is always a jerk, right?
No.
He's he's a bad guy, or he's an unreliable guy, or whatever. I really like
Yeah.
Trevor.
Me
Trevor
too.
is a good guy here,
is.
and you're right that she has put up. I mean,
Barriers.
considering they were way too young
Mm-hmm.
for her to be pregnant, which is not an uncommon thing. Young hormones. Away from home for the whatever. I mean, it's not unusual. And there are loads of books that stem from an unwanted high school pregnancy where people do really bad things or stupid things or whatever it all is. So I think Trevor's a really interesting guy in the context of what you're writing.
Yeah, I really thought this was a book about second chances in general. And in a way, it's also about like not just Delilah and Beckett almost reestablishing a relationship in adulthood. Like you think you know everything about your daughter or your parent, and then as an adult, you kind of re-meet each other. And I thought it was the same with Trevor, who is a good guy. It's just like neither of them were really at the right stage to communicate right
and
with
she
one
really
another.
didn't give him a chance
Yeah, she didn't.
to step up.
She didn't.
She just went.
Yeah,
and
I
there
don't
we
want your
were.
help. I'm not taking
Now
your help.
JT
Yeah.
has done the opposite sort of thing. We start with the dad who looks like a really great guy, really sympathetic and all, and then he goes, and then he's not. So I thought it was interesting that you kind of mirrored each other, but in the reverse.
Yeah.
In the obverse. Sorry,
Yeah.
that's the word.
It's like same themes, you're exploring different ways of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's Hallie's husband, Theo, he's a good guy, and she loves him, and he loves her, but she wants to have a kid, and he doesn't. And that's, at 34, that's the moment where you have to start making those decisions, and, it's breaking them up. And then, the other guy in her life that she trusts more than anything has been lying to her the whole time. So, she's really cast out all by herself.
Like a foundational.
Yeah, I mean, it's an earthquake, right? Everybody has their own personal earthquakes. It's her own personal earthquake, and she has to figure out, how am I going to deal with this? And then gets herself, sideways in a bad situation. And it comes in handy that she has a husband who she's not quite divorced from, who's an ATF agent. that helps, and she doesn't want to ask for help.
Right.
That's the last thing. She's very independent. She doesn't want to ask for help, but sometimes you need help.
Yep.
And that makes the character, again, real.
Relatable.
But also, their vulnerabilities help the story.
Totally.
I think it's interesting. Both of you had long and very happy marriages, and then so it's not like you're writing, from like some sort of personal angst or agenda. Maybe that makes it easier to write about this kind of thing because it isn't personal.
I've like re-examined this in the past because like my mom, every time she reads my book, she's like, really? Again? With a complicated mother-daughter relationship. And I realized, and I'm very close to my parents and I'm very close to my family and I've been married for 20-something years. And I do think that I realize that like I take these relationships that are very important to me and then destabilize them in the books. And like imagine what if you didn't have this? And I realized that I also sort of dedicate the book to the relationship I'm screwing up. It's like like The Last House Guest, which is like Twisted Friendships. I dedicate it to my best friend. This one's to my daughter. So
Wow, that's like having a target on your back.
yeah.
So I want to go back and talk for a moment. This is nothing to do with either of their books, but one of the reasons I was struck by this town and gown thing is that we're actually living through that right now in Scottsdale. And the reason I say that is that there's a big controversy here going on about a parking lot. And I have written to the city council several times to point out to them that we are in a block that has 5 restaurants and only one of them has any parking, meaning they have never stepped foot on the west side of Goldwater to figure out what's going on over here. And now they've sold all of it going south to a Canadian developer, more apartments, more hotels with empty rooms, whatever. I was interested in this property up here. Sorry, guys, but this is an interesting thought. At Indian School and Goldwater, right? It's a block from us, right? And so they've torn down old buildings, and I got the number, and I called them because I thought it'd be interesting to see what kind of retail they were going to put in. And their answer was, remember, they're only going to be like a block from Fashion Square, which is the most successful mall in America and the most expensive mall in America to shop in. Their answer was that they were going to start at $65 a square foot because they want to make it higher end than Beverly Hills in terms of shopping. So here's what will happen is that we're going to get this big property here that will only be any good for people who mostly don't live here and only really occupied for like 4 months out of the year because they're going for the high-end visitor. There's a new hotel right over on Buckboard, I think it is, or Buckwheat or whatever it's called, on the other side across from, across from the W. And I read about it in the paper today, and their motto is, it's not a place to stay, it's a place to be seen. And so, again, in the Wall Street Journal today, this all happened today when I was thinking about it. It's a huge article about our economy and the fact that it is depending on the upper 10%. If they don't spend money, nobody else has any. If they don't spend money, the economy is going to go down. And I thought, we're doing that right here, next door to the bookstore. We are going to be doing that same thing. We are building a huge piece of property that's only going to appeal to that upper 10%, right? So what's going to happen? And I thought about that when when I was looking at your book again today. That's how those people are feeling down there below that college, And I think we are heading in that direction as a country, not just in your particular college town, but I think we are increasingly heading in the direction of town and gown, with high-income people controlling everything and, everybody else having to take. Now, I don't have any personal stake in this because, fortunately, I can afford to run the bookstore as a not-for-profit. I don't get paid, and I can keep it going out of my own money and pay our staff if it turns out that things are going to crater. So I'm not worried for that. But I am worried for all of you, and I'm also worried for Scottsdale because what if we lose all the things that makes it an interesting place, And I think we're heading in that direction. So your book really rang a bell with me, and again today more than usual, right? I hope maybe somebody of any position here in Scottsdale might actually watch this recording. I'm coming for you. No, but I mean, I really do think about it. We've been here, this is almost our 36th year. We'll be 36 years old in October at the bookstore, and we've been here since 1999, and seeing the changes. And part of it is that nobody's paying attention. That's the part I mind the most. Yeah, really. So anyway, I think your book has universal themes at the moment more than you might think. I think that's one reason that it's resonating with people is that people can understand that. Now, let's go over and talk about the CIA, the way we wish it were actually being run by a CIA librarian. I love that. We could only put her in charge.
Yeah. So my pen name for fantasy is Joss Walker. And I saw an ad for a CIA librarian years ago. It was 2016, I think. The CIA was looking for a librarian. I'm like, oh my gosh, that would be so cool. And I sent it to my husband and my assistant, and I said, Jane Bond, CIA librarian. Do not Google Jane Bond. Let me just tell you. We did immediately, and I got a note back. Don't Google Jane Bond. That's a whole different story over there. But obviously, we couldn't use that name because of the Bond franchise. So I changed her name to Jane Thorne, and I was writing it as an actual straight, like lighthearted kind of Homeland story, lighter thriller under my JT name, and it just wasn't coming together. And my agent wasn't thrilled about it. And I had a party at my house, and one of my friends was there, and she writes fantasy, and I was talking to her, and I was thinking about her, and she left, and I was like, what if Jane was magic? What if Jane turned magic back on? And that's the premise of the books. She is an archive librarian at Vanderbilt. She is very smart, very sassy, very introverted, just wants her books and her tea, and she opens a grimoire accidentally, and when she touches it, it throws her into a different world. And when she comes back, there is a very large man standing in the vaults saying, I'm from the CIA and we need to talk. And of course, the bad guys try to recruit her as well. So she has to make a decision whether she's going, and she understands a lot about what they're trying to do. They're naturalists. They want to take the world back to when magic was everywhere. And the CIA wants to stop them from doing that. It's a reverse dystopian. We start in a world with no magic, and we end in a world where everything is magic, which is a lot of fun over the course of the book. So there's 6 books. They're all here. And it's a fun series. It's a little light. It gets darker as it goes on because the weight of the world becomes, on her shoulders as she grows as a magician and becomes a master at her craft. And it is just a lot of fun. I love them.
Fantasy without dragons.
Oh,
I know. Well, okay.
Maybe.
So.
I mean, there's a familiar. There's a familiar at the end. At the 5th book, she gets a familiar who is a portable dragon. He's portable. He can get as big or as small as he needs, which is his name is Hayden. Yeah. Don't.
A pet dragon. I love it. It's interesting that they have now taken what was a cartoon about training your dragon, and turned it into.
I've heard it's amazing.
I know. I am sort of tempted to watch it. I like the original one.
Yeah, it's a great story.
The way AI and other stuff and computer whatever works, you can actually do that now.
Yeah.
When you couldn't. Think about Star Wars. If it were starting today, it would be a whole different. Well, Star Trek. There we are.
All of it.
I know, it's absolutely fascinating. But on the other hand, the fake part is invading us where we can't even see it. So it's kind of nice to know that it's actually fake from the beginning when we go out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you are having a good time with it. Right. So questions from the audience. JT, if you will take them, and would you repeat them because the people watching us can't hear the question if you don't repeat it. Go on, guys. Come on. Your turn.
Don't be shy.
Otherwise, me and JT are going to nerd out over how we use
yeah,
Scrivener
color
again.
code our files. You do not need more of that.
Yes.
Oh, good. A brave person.
You can each take a turn with it because I'm interested in both. But I always find it interesting how someone breaks into publishing, how many years it takes, how many edits. You perfect this book. You may have 27 pages of edits that you go through. So you have this finely tuned debut. And then they give you 8 to 12 months for your next one, and you got to do that every year.
Right.
So my question is, how much time did you have with your debut versus, and then how do you handle the deadlines and manage that?
This is actually a really interesting question. I don't think anybody has ever asked, which is we have all this time to go into our debut novel, and then our second book we have to write in 8 to 12 months. How do we handle that? You want to go first?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I feel like, so for me, my first book I wrote when my kids were very little, and I was writing at night. I put them to bed at like 6:30 with blackout curtains, which worked for a very brief period of time. And then I transitioned to writing during school hours. And that's
To go into a book.
I know.
I know. I mean, whoop, there we go. I'm already envisioning a thriller where the mother puts her kids to bed with blackout curtains so she can go and do whatever
Right, so
evil
she could
is
be a
going.
spy.
That's so good.
Stay tuned, guys. You heard it here first. And I finished that book in about a year. I realized that was about how long it took me to reach the end of something where I sent it out to agents and was soundly rejected by many of them, but got a lot of feedback that got me like, hey, we're interested in the premise. We're interested in your voice. If you want to rewrite this. And I rewrote it from scratch twice. And that took me another 6 months, I think. And I was very fortunate at that point that when we think about like the world of marketing and what's coming out on the shelf, that this was right after Twilight. And I was writing a young adult book that had a little bit of a paranormal romance bend to it. And a lot of agents were interested at that time. And so once I did that, I did have a 2-book deal, but there wasn't a deadline on it, honestly. Like, it was sort of like, what do you think it will take you? And I think that's what I've learned, is that the deadlines are a little bit self-imposed for me, because they're how I feel, how long it naturally takes me to write a story. And that generally comes to about a book a year. But there are books that have taken an extra year. And I do think, like, we would never put out a book that we all didn't think this is the book we want to put out. But there is that feeling of, like, I am writing toward a deadline. I'm someone who actually really likes deadlines. Like, I will wait until, if I will take as much time as is given. And so I feel like I on my first book kind of gave myself self-imposed deadlines, and just sort of like, I still keep school hours. Like, my kids are 17 and 19. They do not need me to take them to and from school, but I still write like 9 to 3 every day. And that routine is very helpful for me. But also sometimes, like, my next book, probably will not be out next summer because it's not done yet. Like, it just needs a little extra time.
Well, actually, you're here off schedule
I
because
am.
Megan has come in April and I warned her a year ago, April. I said, August is not going to be your friend.
It was not.
It turns out it's okay, but
But the book
nonetheless.
wasn't ready, and it took what it took. And so I feel like just knowing that we all want the same thing on the end, and, it would be great if we hit these deadlines, but it's also like no one's going to, put out a book that is not what we're all happy with either. How about you?
So I started writing in earnest in around 2003. When I moved to Nashville, I couldn't find a job, and I turned into a bad country music song. I had a back surgery, and my cat died, and I didn't have any friends, and I kept getting lost. And so I finally, my husband was like, just do something. And I don't know. Well, I do know what it was. I was reading the John Sanford Pray books.
Oh, so good.
And it just hit me. This is what I want to do. I'd been a writer before, and my professors had told me I wasn't good enough to get published, so I quit. And I went in a completely different path. So when we moved back to Nashville, that was when I decided to try to pursue this again. And Taylor Jackson came to me driving down to physical therapy on Interstate 40, and I was like, she's half cop, she's half rock star, she's going to run Nashville, and it's going to be awesome. I don't remember how long it took me. I mean, I wrote a 40,000 word novella and thought it was a novel, and promptly sent it to every editor in New York, not knowing anything. I mean, I was in such a vacuum.
And then you learn by doing.
You
right?
learn by making the mistakes, right? And then I met somebody who took me to a Sisters in Crime meeting and put me in their critique group, and I started learning more about it and realized, I haven't written a novel. And then chucked that, wrote a novel, and that book I got my agent. He found me, which was one of those weird, synchronicity kind of moments. I had a little website on Publishers Marketplace, and he was on there and saw the book and was like, I would like to read this, and then offered representation. It was like, oh my gosh. And that book did not sell. And so he said, write me another one. And I did. And that one did sell literally the day we took it out. We had somebody wrote that night, my editor, and said, do not sell this to anyone else. I'm going to take it to acquisitions tomorrow. And they came back right away with a 3-book deal. And when he called me, he said, can you write 2 books a year?
Oh.
And I went, yes. Did I know if I could write 2 books a year? Absolutely not. It just seemed like, okay, well, sure. I mean, this was in the time of the Allison Brennans of the world. She's in the audience, who was writing 3 books a year. And I looked up to her so much. And if she could write 3 books a year, of course I could write 2 books a year. It set me up to be a fast writer, and a very focused writer. I didn't have kids. I didn't have any of the distractions, right? So it was very easy for me to focus 100% on the work. And I now am writing 1 a year and barely making it. Because the standalones take way more than the series titles, but I say I'm doing one a year, but I was doing 2 a year because I was doing the Joss Walker books too. Yeah. So don't listen to me. I lie. I lie. I lie to
Yeah,
myself.
you're a professional liar. I mean, what's wrong
I
with
get
that?
paid for it.
Right. Oh, love it. Right. Another question?
You guys both have a variety of books. Do you guys have a single book that is your absolute favorite to write?
Oh,
Do
favorite
we,
to write.
yeah. Do
That's
we
a
have
good
a book that is our favorite to write?
Or that was published like that's the best book I've ever done?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I always say like my most recent one is my favorite because you've just spent like years inside these characters' heads, and so like it just feels like I love these people so much, and it's the story I hoped it would be. But I do think there are some books that like linger with me that. Were very rewarding for the writing process itself. And that I would say was my first book for adults, which was All the Missing Girls. It's the book that took me the longest to write. It was my second book idea, but it was my sixth published novel. And it was like this idea I didn't know how to get work, but like I kept coming back to it in between other projects. And finishing a first draft of that book, like finally getting it to what I hoped it would be, I still consider like my career highlight. And I was like alone on my couch, but just this idea of like, I had this idea and it like, I actually got it there 5 years later or something. So because of that, I feel like very connected to that book. And I think about the characters years later. I'm like, I hope they're doing okay. I don't want to put you back in a thriller, but
It is hard. It is hard to pick them, but I'm going to go with No One Knows. It was my first standalone. It took me 5 years to write as I was writing it in between other books, nipping at it here, nipping at it there, and I couldn't make it work. And I mean, it's a really cool story. It's a woman whose husband has been missing and the state of Tennessee has declared him dead. And, wow, what do you do with that, right? You have to move on. And that day she sees a man who looks exactly like her husband. It's like, wait a second. So he's dead, maybe. What was so rewarding about it is I worked so hard on it and I couldn't make it work. And it was very humbling. And I had to put it aside and realize, hey, wow, this is the first time as a professional author I've written something that doesn't work. And that I put in a drawer and said, okay, well, this isn't going to happen. And I did it multiple times over the course of 5 years until I was sitting down with a friend having coffee and I was telling her about it. And literally mid-sentence, I had one of those lightning strikes. And I said, oh my God, Blake, I'm so sorry. And I walked out and I went home and I started at the beginning of the book and I rewrote the entire book in 3 days, landed the plane. And it was the wildest experience to just, I felt so bad. She was just like, she goes, I didn't care. A, I had invited you, so I was paying. And B, I saw the light bulb go on over your head. And you were worthless anyway. And I did, I was not been able to talk. I literally got up and left. And went home and did that. And I sent it to my former editor who bought my first books in 3-book deal. When she retired, she went and edited on the side. And I sent it to her. She had read it once before and was, she was, yeah, I agree. It's just not there. I sent it to her again. And she wrote me a text and went, holy JT. And I knew I had it. And that was my first standalone that sold. No One Knows.
So it's the challenges that really
it's the
are
challenges,
the ones that
absolutely.
are the most rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe one more question? Anybody? No, you're all, look.
Sure. As an aspiring writer, what would you probably get asked this a lot, but you have a lot more experience than I do. So, what would you say is your best piece of advice for an aspiring writer? Your single best piece of advice?
Oh, my single best piece. Oh no. Oh no.
By Scrivener. I thought you already heard that.
No, I usually have like, okay. I actually am going to go back to as I was revising, it was All the Missing Girls, and my editor, we were trying to figure out how to end the book. And she asked me, because I had like 7 endings, it just wouldn't end. I was like, I don't know where this book ends. And she said, think about how you want people to feel. And that is something that I think about all the time at all stages of my writing now, is I'm like, in this scene, how do I want somebody to feel? And I think that like supersedes plot and stuff like that. And that's what I'm going to go with for writing.
That's excellent advice.
Sarah Knight, shout out.
Oh, I know Sarah.
She's great.
She's the best.
Yeah.
Hi, Sarah. We love you. Mine is going to be more practical because part of, we talked about you're going to have to meet deadlines. You're going to have to do all these things. And it is find your time and respect it and expect the people around you to respect it as well. Because you can say, I'm a writer, you can be doing your work, but if people won't take that seriously for you, you're going to have a really big challenge ahead. So find your time and stick to it and read.
Yeah.
I mean, read
Yes.
everything.
Everything.
In and out of your genre.
And I'll second that, and I can tell you that authors who come to see us are very often our very best customers. JT has been on a buying jag while she's here.
There's a huge stack of books
Right.
over there, and I am not
we
done
have-
because
we
I couldn't
have
come up
authors
here.
all over who send in, who order their books online and ask for dedications because they're friends of the author. It's really interesting how to track all that. So it's been great. You've been a wonderful audience. Let's give our authors a round of
Thank
applause.
you.
Now,